Hello, this is Yaakov Kronenberg from Jerusalem, and tonight we'll be doing another class on our series Capricorn Ascendant and the planets in the different houses, and Saturn in the different houses, signs. Tonight we'll be doing Saturn in Scorpio. Person who has this combination, it's a very, very complicated type of person, right? Because he's got the ruling planet there. The ruling planet is a malefic, Saturn, and it's in the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign. Remember, the most complicated people are, for the most hand, the water people. The emotions, people who have emotional problems are the most difficult to deal with. Right? It's much harder than, say, dealing with somebody who's got, earth, strong. They just want money and comfort and security. The fire people, they want power. But the air people, they want knowledge. But the water people, they're very, very complicated personalities, especially when you got the Scorpio is very, very deep-seated emotion, very turbulent. It's like, there's the Scorpion is like the whirlpool. And so you got the whirlpool in Saturn, and it can difficult emotional type of person if the chart is difficult. Tonight we're going to see somebody who had a very difficult Saturn in Scorpio. It harmed him very much. He had great success in his career, but he was harmed emotionally by that, because there was a lot of difficult aspects to that Saturn. But anyway, in a general way, Saturn in Scorpio doesn't have to be particularly bad, but it's just there's going to be deep-seated emotion. Remember that Saturn is a very cautious, very foresight person, and the Scorpio is very, very concealing. It hides everything. The Scorpio doesn't like to reveal anything about itself, and so it hides things. And on the other hand, it's truly a very suspicious type of sign. Always wants to get the goods on other people. It itself is very defensive, but it's always going after the others to reveal their faults and their difficulties. So it can be difficult in a complicated chart. But in any case, if you have Scorpio, Capricorn rising, so then Saturn and Scorpio will fall in the 11th house, which is the house of friendship and hopes and desires. So it on the one hand, it makes problems, romantic problems, falling in the 11th. The 11th is a romantic house, the 5th house of the partner. So it can cause some lack of love. I've seen a lot of charts like this that Scorpio in Saturn with in Scorpio in the 11th. It can give a lot of sort of romantic problems. The person feels unloved. Tremendous feeling of being unloved. It can happen if you got Scorpio in Saturn and Scorpio there. So it can be in a certain way a difficult combination. It's going to be the Scorpio, the Capricorn is going to try to fulfill themselves through their friends. And a lot of times when you have that in the 11th house, so there's going to be a big need for friendship. And so it's going to be like it's an interesting combination. I want to look at a chart tonight, actually, of a very famous man in America. He was the first chief of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in America. Right? His name was J. Edgar Hoover, and he was a Capricorn rising with Saturn. It was a little bit off. Instead of falling in the 11th, it was in Scorpio, but in the 10th house. So it's working more towards his career. It's working towards both, towards his career and towards his friendship. But actually, he had his best friend he made the assistant to the number 2 post in the FBI, and they worked together very much. But in any case, when you hear he had the Saturn in Scorpio in the 10th, and the Scorpio is truly an investigative sign. A lot of people that Scorpio on the 10th is tremendously interested in research, getting to the depth of problems. It makes a lot of scientists, a lot of people that like to go into depth to understand things deeply. Psychologists have that, and detectives here like him. He was the head of the chief detective agency in America, the government detective agency, and that's the Saturn in Scorpio. A career dedicated to dealing with the subservience, the enemies of the country. And so he was that, plus he went way overboard. We'll see that he went way overboard. Besides worrying about that, he tended to, he had dossiers on he was getting the dirt on all the politicians and all the top people in the country, so nobody could, bring him down. He had the dirt on everybody. And in the end, it made him a very bad name in the end of his career. And we see that in his chart. First of all, he's got this. So he's got the. First of all, you have to look at one thing. He's got the Capricorn rising, Saturn in the 10th. So he's going to fulfill himself through his career. We see the career of detective, right, with the Scorpio, Saturn and Scorpio. And besides that, when you have 1 in 10, it always tends to bring you to power. And in his chart, he also has the ruler of 10, which is Venus in the 1st house. So he runs after power, and power runs after him. And not only that, but the Venus is also conjunct the Sun, which is another indication of honor. So he has a lot of indications of honor. But he was, it was a very strong chart. He's got Saturn in the 10th, 3 planets, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury in the 1st. Jupiter close to being on the descendant. So he's got already 5 planets and he's got Mars in the 4th. So he's got everything, all the angles covered. But in his chart, he's got the ruler of the 10th. Mars is in detriment in the 4th house, and the Saturn is opposite the Mars, which is one of the most complicated aspects, right? Saturn and Mars, they just don't go together. One is very hot and one is very cold, and they're always conflicting and fighting with each other. And they're both in sexual signs, right? Mars is in detriment in the sign, the Venus sexual sign, and Mars is in the male sexual sign. So when those 2 planets are in those signs, it always brings sexual difficulties to the person, especially when it's on an angular position. And so there was always rumors about his homosexuality and things like that. And so he was a very complicated man. Because that Saturn is so complicated. Saturn in Scorpio, it gets the opposition from Mars, and the Saturn also has a loose conjunction to Uranus. So also again the desire for weirdness, for strangeness, in that. The Iranian in aspect to his ruling planet. Saturn is very conservative, and Uranus is very modern, and so he's always pulling against the new and the old. And so it was a very difficult chart for the man. I'm sure he had a very complicated life. And also his moon was in Pisces, again a very deep moon, in the water sign there. Yes, a very complicated man, and I thank everybody for listening.